Mimo sangmola tashitele, naming like it sounds secure. Nga EU peering sope, EU peering sope, check genzi pa lega chigi. Hello everyone. My name is Golog Jigme. I'm working at the Tibetan community in Tibetan as the event manager.
Samolo tashitele naming la tenzin wongdi nga period sobaki shenge gentle pai. Good morning everyone. My name is Tenzin Wongtu and I'm the youth coordinator in the Tibetan community in Britain. Tibetan Uprising Day, observed on 10th March, commemorates 1959 Tibetan peaceful uprising against the communist Chinese repression in the Tibetan capital of Lhasa, which led to a violent crackdown of Tibetan's independence movement and the fight of His Holiness the 14th Dalai Lama into exile.
It was the most tragic development without any parallel in the history of Tibet, and it is impossible for the people of Tibet, to the generation after generation, to ever forget this tragic movement in their nation history. Ever since the Great Uprising Day, the Tibetan people have, wherever they happen to reside, commemorate the occasion as the historically important event in the Tibetan calendar on March 10th. After 62 years of resistance, Tibetan people around the globe still find a way to resist the suppression regime of China. In exile, we have a freedom, but it doesn't stop here. We as a Tibetan around the world relentlessly fighting for our freedom.
This year marks the 62nd anniversary of Tibetan Uprising Day. Around the world, Tibetan and their supporters will remember and pay tribute to all those who have sacrificed their lives for Tibet's struggle then and now. An estimated 1 million Tibetans have perished and 98% of monasteries and nunneries have been destroyed since the Chinese Communist invasion of Tibet.
Despite the strict lockdown here in the UK, the Tibetan community in Britain, along with Tibet groups, will ensure Tibet voice is heard. Today, we at the Tibetan community in Britain have joined the Free Tibet, Student for Free Tibet, the Tibet Society to commemorate this occasion, along with the special guest speaker from the MPs to the human rights activities, to filmmakers and the Tibetan members from across the UK, who will also be making appearance throughout the program. We start off this program with playing Tibetan National Anthem. Thank you all the Tibetan children who took part in this national anthem, and to the Gay Jamia Lab for organizing this, and to the Rinzi Wankela for editing and putting the video together. Thank you so much for their efforts. Now our next guest speaker will be Sonam Frasi, who is a representative of Office of Tibet.
Tashi Delek and greetings to you all. We all know that on this day in March 1959, the people of Lhasa rose against the invasion of Tibet by the People's Liberation Army of the Chinese Communist Party. In this virtual commemoration and remembrance of our fallen Tibetan brothers and sisters who had given their lives for our country, I salute and pay great respect to them on behalf of all of us. Tibetans all over the world continue to stand against the invasion and illegal occupation of our country. Tibetans have always resisted and repeatedly rose against the Chinese invasion and illegal occupation of Tibet right from the beginning in 1949, followed by major uprisings taking place in 1959, 1966, 1987, and 2008. In 2009, at breaking point, Tibetans began another form of protest, self-immolation, a tragic act arising from the anguish of oppression. Last year, on this day, I said, although US is not openly advocating regime change in China, but this was something in their thought process. True to my prognosis, in August 2020, the United States of America precisely called to the free world to regime change and change the Chinese Communist Party. The enactment of the Tibetan Policy and Support Act of 2020 by the United States of America is a great victory for the cause of Tibet, and I would like to thank the government and the people of the United States of America for their support and their leadership. This United States law is a model for other free nations to follow, to show solidarity and change much needed course correction in dealing with the Chinese Communist state. This law specifically empowers the United States government to take all appropriate measures to hold accountable senior officials of the People's Republic of China government and the Chinese Communist Party members who directly interfere with the identification and installation of the future 15th Dalai Lama. This law formally recognizes the Central Tibetan Administration as the institution that represents and reflects to the greatest extent and the inspirations of the Tibetan diaspora all around the world, and the Sikyong is the president of the Central Tibetan Administration. The will formally acknowledges the middle way approach advocated by His Holiness the 14th Dalai Lama that seeks genuine autonomy for the 6 million Tibetans in Tibet to achieve and allow Tibetans to freely enjoy their culture, religion, and language. This year, we have seen some very successful campaigns in spite of the restrictions imposed under the Wuhan-originated COVID-19 pandemic situation. The month-long campaign for the release of the 11th Panchen Lama was really successful because the Chinese government finally had to admit through the United Nations that Panchen Lama and his families were well, although no evidence was produced. I thank the concerned people who made the campaign success. The impact of the imposition of Chinese Communist Party's security law in Hong Kong was brutal and crushed the whole democratic system of governance in Hong Kong. Hong Kong and Tibet both lived through the broken treaties of the Chinese Communist Party. Many liberal democratic countries have started to view China more negatively, and we were able to amplify our case more robustly during the year through various virtual conferences with leading think tanks. We stand shoulder to shoulder by the Uyghur people against the CCP's subjugation of the Uyghur nationals to concentration camps and genocide practices. The human rights violation in Tibet is ongoing. We already know of the existence of the re-education or brainwashing programs in monasteries, nunneries, and in other settings of Tibetan society imposed by the Chinese. the large-scale labor movement through a militarized vocational training system practiced in Tibet, identified by Mr. Aiton Zenz, and independent research is a very disturbing move by the Chinese to assimilate Tibetans into Chinese society. We categorically protest this inhuman action and call on China to stop this and other programs of relocation of Tibetans from their ancestral homeland. China has no right to uproot Tibetans from their land and independent livelihood. The current CCP mantra of Sinicization of all and every aspect of Tibetan religion, culture, language, thoughts are a gross attempt of social transformation and social engineering. They are forcing the Tibetans to be Han Chinese by stealth. I would like to take this opportunity to offer our deep appreciation to all of you listening to this message, members of the Tibet Support Group across the world and their respective governments, members of parliaments, individuals and organizations who support the just cause of Tibet and stand in solidarity with the Tibetan people in this crucial and critical time. I conclude by saying I would like to pray and dedicate all our wishes and efforts for the fulfillment and the vision and wishes of His Holiness the Dalai Lama. Long live His Holiness and victory for Tibet. Thank you.
Thank you so much for Sonam Frasi for his great speech.
Now we have Dugdala, who is the director of Student for Free Tibet UK. He is currently studying at the University of Edinburgh.
Hello everyone, I am Dr. Gill, National Director of Student for Free Tibet UK. Today we are commemorating the 62nd Tibetan National Uprising Day. On 10th March 1959, tens of thousands of Tibetans took to the street of Lhasa against the Chinese illegal occupation. They surrounded Norpulinka, the great palace of His Holiness the Dalai Lama, to protect his life and future of Tibet. Thousands of Tibetans killed on the day when Chinese Liberation Army fired. Tibetans refused to surrender. Today we are remembering one of the greatest days when the whole Tibetans came together against the occupation, invasion, and separation. Today we are remembering the Pawos and Pamos who resist against the Chinese occupation. All these years, Chinese authoritarians tries to break the Tibetan spirit, Semshuk, destroy more than 60,000 Tibetan monasteries, assimilation and genocide Tibetan language. Last 60 years, Tibetans put in the darkest prisons. We are still fighting for the rights and the new generations rising up against the occupation. Tibetans in Tibet fighting for the rights in non-violence and peaceful way. Tibet nation is depending on every one of us. We never give up and we keep fighting for the freedom. The Tibetan new generations moving on the street and we will fight for the freedom. Pegelo.
Thank you, Dugdala. Also, Dugdala started his own podcast. The podcast is in Tibetan language. It is a weekly discussion on history, politics, and current affairs with regards to Tibet and China in the 21st century. This podcast is called The Intelligent Tibet. So please listen if you have not already done so.
Our next guest speaker, Tim Loughton. Tim Loughton is the Conservative MP for show of hand and the is voting, and the chair of the all-party parliamentary group for Tibet. He has been a long-standing supporter for Tibet cause, frequently speaking at the 10th of March events and raising Tibet in the parliament, including his effort to introduce a reciprocal access bill in the law.
Hello, I'm Tim Loughton, Member of Parliament of the British Parliament and the co-chair of the All-Party Parliamentary Group for Tibet. Now, in remembering the 10th of March, I want to send my best wishes to the Tibetan people throughout the world as we commemorate the anniversary of the 1959 uprising against the brutal Chinese occupation. In doing so, we remember those Tibetans who lost their lives in 1959, those thousands of Tibetans who've lost their lives at the hands of the Chinese in subsequent decades, and those many thousands who were forced to flee into exile, including the community of Tibetans in Dharamsala and, of course, His Holiness, the Dalai Lama. I hope that this year the eyes of the world will be firmly upon China. The publicity about the atrocities committed against the Uyghur people, the suppression of freedoms within Hong Kong, and the suppression of the indigenous Mongolian people as well, will mean more than ever that the world is with the cause of the Tibetan people that many of us have championed over so many years. The plight of political prisoners still being incarcerated by the Chinese, the suppression of the Tibetan religion, of language, of culture, and the depriving of nomad farmers of their livelihoods, as well as they are forced into retraining camps. These are all atrocities committed on a daily basis against the Tibetan people that the world needs to see and hear and wake up to. So I send you my good wishes on the 10th of March, and I can assure you that your cause is being heard loud and clear in the British Parliament, because the Tibetan cause is a cause of peace, freedom and democracy, and China needs to stand up to account for its heinous crimes.
I would like to especially say thank you to Tim Loughton for making this statement and support for the Tibet cause. So our next performer is Tashi Tunjubla from Bristol, who are going to sing a song dedicated to Lundrup Thakpa, who has been sentenced to 6 years in prison by Chinese communists for singing a song called Black Hat. The title of the song relates to the Tibetan proverb, "Don't put a black hat on an innocent person," or "Don't cause any innocent person of wrongdoing."
Samalolia, somebody down Testile, Shugi, and in Yemelia, Testin Sugi, not under the desert, the England, Nalayu. Ani Narangi, Namatolia, Ani Pune, Ludu Tabagi, Ani Shaman Nabatombi, Ani Shade, Yanjo, Namatolia, Jimbi Shui, Ani Kais and a Kongi Shade, Tambadang, Jana Shungi Kolia, Ani Tuje Lotu Jabare, Ani Narangi Shade, Kolia, Dosi Nyamji, and Mochin, any Narangi Shade Jambayi, Ani Ni Revachi, Ani Karisena. Ninshin Kamama, Jimbe Narona, Shue Ji Dang, Seda Kamama Jerona, Shui, any day Ni Ning in the Revadang, Big Shui.
De Cherry Marishila Yo Jishamo Nabo Techio so Shatimashu Dadare Dundi Mande Tokinyo Asanganyo so
Thank you, Tashi Chunjobla, for making this dedicated song to the Rundup Chapala. It's a great song. Thank you so much. Now our next guest speaker, Wera Hobhouse MP. Wera Hobhouse is the Liberal Democratic MP for Bath and one of the latest additions to the all-party parliamentary group or Tibet. She has already raised Tibet several times in Parliament.
I'm Wera Hobhouse, MP for Bath. On this day of remembering the Tibetan Uprising 62 years ago, I mourn with you that Tibet is still under brutal authoritarian rule. Despite the terrible suffering, the Tibetan people have been resolute in their dignity and pursuit of non-violent solutions. That has won your admiration globally, but it cannot be enough. The oppression of the Tibetan people is a scar on the conscience of the world. Here in Britain and in the West, there is increasing awareness of the true nature of the Chinese Communist Party. We must stand together against their inhumane regime. On this day of commemoration, I praise you, the Tibetan people, for your patience, and I urge you not to give up.
Thank you so much for Wera House for making this inspiring speech and her great efforts and support towards the Tibet cause. Thank you so much.
Now we have the Tibetan community members who will sing the remembrance song of March 10th, 1959.
Free Tibet.
This was the Remembrance Song of March 10, 1959. I would like to say a big thank you to all the singers from Kungala, Tenjela, Champadojila, Pempasotola, Pamola, and Samola for putting their time to do this Remembrance Song. And also, big thank you to Rinze Wongela for putting the video together. We will now hear from Golog Jigme. Golog Jigme is the Tibetan filmmaker and human rights activist. Before the 2008 Beijing Olympics, Golog Jigme worked with Thundup Wongchen to film the documentary Leaving Fear Behind. Before it was completed, both Golog Jigme and Thundup Wongchen were imprisoned. Fortunately, their film footage reached the wider world, and so ultimately did both of them. Golog Jigme used his freedom to work tirelessly for the rights of his fellow Tibetans, relating his experience in prison where he was brutally tortured. Despite this mistreatment of Golog Jigme and other Tibetans, Beijing has been awarded another Olympic, even next year's Winter Game. Here we have Golog Jigme speaking about the Winter Games.
Nabalanji, Tracy de Long, Golog Jigme. Tane, Olong Little, Nitonistani, Gaki Olong Little Dance of Camdela. Tachu Niton Jacolo, Olong Little Dance of Coach Chunchata. Tivark, Tachu Natal Mamboji. Tani Olong Little Nitonistani, Gaki Olong Little Dance of Coton Tatser. Samsakari was in it. Draws Zutang, Tela Samsar should son do Tela Maranga Lantan to Samsar do this Jet of Jagan. Tanito Jacalo, all of the Nansontas in Jana Trani, Tatela, Chinese Godreta, all the Transo Tratica, Jana Jimunina, that she shows the Congo Dravi Totan, Yajetan, Shoma was the Yajetaya, Yinze, Kilinchi or that. All of the Transo, Shion was an Taju Dravi, Totari, Tajik Maso Dana, one the work long share. But the teacher comes out. Tabazambi, no church, Chimbochori. She not all only send us all that's a movie, it's a model that you must have Jacob Season so that you worry or touch you or something. That's a Motimoragatone, Taiwan Chimko, sitting and the corner, Teddy. You're not a Jedi, more than Chimbo, the one of Jimmo, touch you. I guess you're on the so Jones, touching, draw me. Cesok semose Jim Zula Cesok semose Cechila Trana, monitor the Trapazami Notre Lamaram with the Chevio, Trano, Trasa, and Sama no church. O Tenetan Newton Jenny Tower, touching one number Nertani, the Hali other Sonore, 주대랑와 코로나 마저랑와 코로나 가이크 코로나 로미 토토다 그시었던 거 매즈에는 따지 누르 다 먹어서 그들 로다 우리 어떤지 전에다 원나가 원번에 통다 항상 강경 잡고 오늘이 전에다 오거근에 통해 정보원에 통해 양 머리 코로나에 통해 리카리 먹어서 잡고 우리 따때 올라리진 단속 가서 나서 팀 통신데 때 시위전에다 올라리진 경기 올라리진 단속도 전에다 모니터네 다 전로다 자사 니차 로미 최소가 제모세에서 문제 제거 말도 잠바라 싸우는 거랑 문제 제미 어떤지들 대내전 니통 약도 다가 주트로님 조부가 gem선도 가리베지 좋았던도 단 주트로님 조부가 gem선도 다 자나로 좀거 다지 작전 뭐지 다지 잠나로 지라 셋 접촉점 마셔 때지네 다지 뭐 원더 저 다시 후야지 당하고 강에 착한 거 다니네 강에 야지 담배지 뭐 당하고 저 작전 rap타나 받자도리 대라 때네 당가서 원는 거 내가 원돈 무 원는 내 당다 원미 생콘 거 린도 다 원미 샘는 거 따스는 데지 다 지금 무션 거 코나서 따스로 샘는다 가십션도 받대 다 지금 나 잡아만 몰라 대방 그 제대로 지표로는데 돈을 완전다 되다 뭐보지 어디나네 택시에 또 수냐도 라테네 다 지표로는데 내래 대라 다 뒤지나 다 지금 섬지되는데 단이 또 약그 선배 집시당 선배 중앙가 섬지당 섬지가 나서 왜나 돈데 랍통은 다 너무 감성을 총하래 다 때는 뭐실 일단 뭐뭐 세속 당월이 뭐뭐 챕트나 당월이 뭐뭐 나스트 당월이 다 된지네 다 그런 데랑 가랑다고 이나라 된지네 자시라 용네 다 실로가 용거야 된지스 그 당네 로미 내스당당 다 나스트 다 세속 따라하는 거 예유라 용아 된지가 내 통탈이 된지가 다 니토니지 자니 올라리트 나도다 제기잖아 오늘 전에다 자만 먹는 거나 내가 니버도 삼로던 거야. 또 차거리 삼고 되나나 되나 지금 다 잔도나 자사오나 모니터는 미 로미 채소 같이 뭐지 지체는 지금 막 통하는 건데 제임이 어때네 지금 다 때네 다 지금 야시 다 지금 담보 문에 날에 때네 다 지금 약결이 있는 날에 진전바의 날에 단달라 냠식진에 서당세나 뭐네 야나가 놀이데 무스 지른 제달이 대냠식지야나 잡혀지야나 다까지야나 대 제도 하려 같이 뭐래 다 야나가 작전다 야나가 골골당 합주 때라 냐네 만조지 야나가 뭐네 또 무다니 로미 토타집에 돌아 로미 채소가 제목 가르치 제거 메터도 뭐네라는 사스 진진데 어떻게 시위전의 로미 채소 제목에 지체가 요노데 시위전의 로에나 단에 zel로가리 그다 제목에 테라 다 담보탄에 디소라 로미 채소 제목에 로미 채소 제목에 고는 시위전의 통신 대지가 로미 채소 제목에 제목에서 잡혀진 나바도 그런 거 시위전다고 그래 다 마시에서 내가 공고고 오늘 내가 좀 공고고 오늘 잡적들마다 되게 지내야 지금 마시에로 전에 대소나 따문이 전에 다 지금 로미 다 지금 갈라 버려 다 지금 지금 통통자는 놓으셔 맞다 바티니즈가 손에 잠나랑 지금 이제 되게 모델이 때 제거송 대진에 내가 담보다가 송하나 모니터에 딱 즉 탑쪽으로 데리지 찾고 그랬다 시비전도 담으니까 볼로세네 나라에 다 지금 리스트 그 단에 갈지에 나라 다지 시즌들로 하면 계속 세무세치 제사들라 로네 yaptircenar tamodan yamjiya tesoina tachi ta khoranga tinala 계속 세무세치긴 그 다타라 처송하는 거는 문제 제거래 또 단 잠만 마마나리 잠만 그 군이 담보하나 제모하나리 야나고 모동다 야나고 마루 좀 모동다 야나고 마루 좀 그거 이런 싸우지에다 다 말하는 거군요 알리가 담보 거지에 어떻게
Thank you, Golog Jigme, for those powerful points which you have made. We would like to urge all of you to sign the petition. You can find the link on the description. And we need to hold China and the International Olympic Committee accountable for their human rights abuse. As of March 2021, Tibet has been ranked #1 least free country in the world. This year, we have received the devastating news of bailless arrests, imprisonment, and Chinese police brutality towards Tibetans for simply not registering their WeChat account or for distributing pamphlets calling Tibetans independence. Also, Tibetan teenager and monk Tenzin Nyima was just 19 when he died after being beaten in Chinese custody for publicly calling for Tibetan independence. Next up, we have John from Free Tibet, who is going to talk about lobbying for Tibet.
Thank you, Wangdu, and thank you, Gelek, for inviting me to speak at this commemoration of the Tibetan Uprising of 1959. I recognise that these are not the circumstances that we wanted to be gathering in, and when I think back to previous 10th March events and the activity in the streets, it makes me hope that we can return to normality soon. But nevertheless, this has been a really incredible event, despite the circumstances. Free Tibet is privileged to have a close relationship with the Tibetan community, and one that continues to go from strength to strength. And it is never stronger than in our work every 10th March, when together we remember those who courageously rose up in 1959 and show solidarity with those who continue to live under this 7-decade-long occupation, which, if we have anything to do with it, will come to an end very soon. Although we cannot take to the streets this year to call for freedom, I want to highlight one action that we can take. Next week, starting 15th March, we will be holding our annual lobby for Tibet, in which we encourage everyone to contact their MPs and ask them to take action for Tibet. We have 2 asks this year. First is to call on the Foreign Office to impose sanctions on Chen Chuangguo. Chen was once the senior official in Tibet under the occupation between 2011 and 2015, the key person in turning Tibet into a surveillance state. As we just heard, Tibet was last week ranked as the worst place in the world for civil liberties and political freedoms, alongside Syria, by the organisation Freedom House. This is Chen's legacy in Tibet, and his reward was to be put in charge of the Uyghur region, East Turkestan, to the north of Tibet, where he's currently overseeing what a growing number of governments consider to be a genocide. Such acts must be met with a firm response if we are to protect further lives. It's for this reason that we're asking people to get their MPs to contact the Foreign Office and call for sanctions against Chen. Second ask is to call for a diplomatic boycott of the 2022 Winter Games. We heard Golog Jigme just now, who knows from personal experience how the 2008 Beijing Olympics did nothing for human rights, despite the promises of Chinese officials and the International Olympic Committee. They were a human rights disaster, and the fact that Beijing is due to host the Winter Games next year is an even bigger stain on the world's conscience, because this time nobody is even pretending that the Games will lead to human rights improvements or a more open China. They are simply a reward for the CCP's repression. The IOC has no interest in reversing this decision, so we will need to convince our governments to act. They need to pledge that they will not grace the Games with their presence. You can find the details of the lobby and how to take part on the social media pages of Free Tibet and the Tibet community. We have model letters, talking points, and guides if you would like to meet your MPs online. Free Tibet and the Tibetan community will continue to work together to push for these goals, and hopefully this time next year we will be standing together once again outside the Chinese embassy, calling for freedom in Tibet. Thank you.
Thank you very much, John, for your speech, and I urge all of us to contact our local MPs and make the Tibet voice heard. Now we have Tibetan Community in Britain Chairwoman Pema Yokola.
Tangla dashtile, longo tuju denyi nang, gyashongi migyu, nganzo pergi ngowo tang, rikshong, zame tangya di, tatong wote ne yu. Tanda per nang, gole tato judo tang, mass surveillance, shipsher, tome tsunjuk, neme tsunjuk tsoki, neshongi netang wok, hajang kange teshingdu. Kenangbe 상매 셰바낭시 단다 gyashongi pergi geyik same sotap chigiyere. Find your local Tibet group, contact them, ask what campaigns they're focusing on, ask how you can help. And if you don't have time, think about making a donation. A donation to the organization is of great benefit to grow a campaign and to get more information out there to the wider audience. If you're a student or planning to go to university soon, think about organizing a Tibet group or chapter on campus. You can make it super fun by by organizing film screenings, cultural events with food, music. But if you don't feel comfortable organizing or setting up a group, you can always join other human rights groups that are on your campus, like Amnesty International or climate change groups. And, through there, you can start to build allies, friends, like-minded people, meet like-minded people, and start to bring the conversation of Tibet. And through that way, you can highlight the issues facing Tibet. Social media. Social media is a powerful tool. Use it. Retweet, reshare posts that you see on Tibet onto your platform for your peers to see. People may not always comment back, but they're watching, and I think that is important. That's great that they're seeing it. Educate yourself to educate others. I think this is a really good one. There are so many great resources out there. If you visit Free Tibet's website, International Tibet Campaign, International Tibet Network, they have some really detailed resources, written reports. They're quite lengthy, but they're easy to read. And, reports on issues facing Tibet right now, from climate change to mass surveillance, to language rights, etc. So Human Rights Watch also is a good one to check out. They actually just wrote one about Tibetan language rights, China's attempt to wipe out Tibetan language and how they're doing that today. So I would encourage you to read that. And yeah, it's just a really good way to I think it's important for us to have that deeper knowledge so that we feel confident in telling our friends, our colleagues, our peers, or to your local MP, the issues really facing Tibet and how we can make a difference. So yeah, check those websites out. So these are just some of the things that we can do. They're super easy and they're super simple. For the last 5 years, Tibet has been ranked second least free country in the world, after Syria. But just last week, Freedom House, the respected think tank, ranked Tibet #1 least free country in the world, joint with Syria. Yet despite the heavy crackdown and repression inside Tibet, Tibetans inside have been creating new ways to resist, to protect their identity and their culture. So now is the time for us to amplify our actions for Tibetans inside Tibet, for their basic freedoms and for our culture and identity. We can do it. It's not easy, for sure, but our consistent action, our amplified pressure can make a difference. Free Tibet, Pergelo.
Thank you, Pamela, for your speech and pointing out what little action we can take for Tibetan freedom movement. Please see all the relevant links on the description and also keep an eye on our social media and take action by sharing our contents. The Tibetan community in Britain youth, along with London Football Club, have started our own weekly virtual talk during the lockdown, where we talk about various Tibet topics and issues. This is a fun way to engage, learn, educate, and also to meet new people. This is a totally safe environment for young Tibetans to express their thoughts and feelings. If there are any young Tibetans who wants to get involved, please get in touch with us.
So now I would like to end this program with playing a song called Long Show, who is performed by Tibetan community members. Thank you so much for that. I would like to especially thank you all the performers, Sonam La, Sampe La, Kunsan La, Tsomo La, Shirab La, and Im La. I personally would like to thank you all the special guests, performers, and I think it's without their effort, the program would not be possible. And thank you so much for that. And bye, everyone.
Big hello.
Big hello. Big hello.